What's up, D1 Nation? Thanks for tuning in to the first ever D1 Training Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Vickers, coming to you from the place for the athlete, D1 Training. Got a fitness goal? Then our turf is your turf. D1 offers elite athletic training by expert coaches in classes or one-on-one sessions for members aged 7 through adult, as well as a strategic franchise model for those looking to up their professional game. Check us out online at d1training.com, d1franchise.com, or at D1 Sports on any of your favorite social platforms. Today's guest is Dan Murphy. Dan Murphy joined the D1 team in 2005 and currently serves as the Chief Operating Officer. His passion for athletics and training was born out of his experience attending the United States Military Academy at West Point, where he was the captain of the soccer team. After serving in the Army, Dan moved back to Nashville, received his MBA from Vanderbilt University. While in school, he became a member at the first D1 facility and partnered with Will to help grow his vision for D1 nationally. As COO, Dan oversees company partnerships and monitors operational and strategic priorities for the D1 franchise management team. He was an integral part of the company's expansion outside the Southeast and has played a pivotal role in turning D1 into a multi-million-dollar franchise company. Without further ado, here's Dan Murphy. Dan Murphy, welcome to today's show. Appreciate you having you on.
It's a pleasure and honor to be here, Andy. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. We like to just dive straight in on these. So I want to rewind it all the way back to your days as an athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think it's really what's kind of driven me to even be part of this business, and I can kind of get to that. But growing up, I was a soccer player and a goalkeeper specifically, and I was kind of my dad's 5'8", my mom's 5'4". So I think football was never going to be in the genetics in terms of beyond the middle school, high school level, but really took to soccer. At the same time, my dad was he's kind of the guy I looked up to. He was a former military guy himself, career military, retired as a colonel. So when I had the opportunity from high school to kind of pick where I wanted to go, I decided to go to West Point because that was it fit both needs. They were recruiting me heavy for soccer. And then at the same time, I thought I was going to be career. I thought I wanted to be just like my dad and kind of, serve the country and, everything cool that you think as a young man what the military is. And so had an opportunity to go to West Point, play there. I take to tell everybody this is back in the 90s. So I'm dating myself a little bit. Graduated in 96. And back then you could be 5'11", 180 and still be a Division I goalkeeper. So don't think that exists today. I think most of the guys are at least 6'2", 6'4", going in. So had an unbelievable experience there. It was really soccer was one of the things that got me through. And I think it got me through mainly because of the discipline around, what you have to bring from a focus perspective to your sport, because the academy on its own is difficult. But when you have something, to kind of pair it with in terms of your, going after a goal, kind of going hard at, training to be the best version of yourself and to perform on the field, that can't help but bleed into, the academic life, the other things that you have to do. So I really credit, probably would have had a much tougher time, even getting through school without being an athlete. So it's just foundational to who I am.
And you actually became the captain of that soccer team, correct?
I did. Yeah, that was an honor as well. I like to think, especially in that role as goalkeeper, you are the field general. You got everybody in front of you. You kind of see how the play evolves, that sort of thing. But at the same time, you have to, it was about creating trust. It was about creating a discipline, a work ethic, those sort of things, leading by example, I guess. I mean, leadership really in that role, whether it's in sports or in business, it really gets down to, it's a skill, and it's a skill of influence. We talk about this a lot at D1, culture is not a set of beliefs really. It's really a set of actions and behaviors. So you have to model that, from the jump. And so your job as a leader is to, again, be as a skill of influence is to really influence, people to take those action and behaviors, not just talk about it. So I think that's what, ultimately got me in that position, both from a trust from the coaches and as well as the players that put me in.
Let's talk about how you transition that into your military service. So what did you do in the military, and did, that time at West Point as captain kind of help catapult you into, being in leadership in the military?
It did. Yeah. So on graduation, you essentially get commissioned into the military as an officer, as a second lieutenant, and you go right into your basic course and then right to your first duty assignment. And that is typically as a platoon leader if you're in the combat arms. I was a field artillery officer, which, we're the big guns, the 155s, those sort of things that are in support of infantry units. But it's kind of a diverse branch in that you can be positioned with the forward guys, and then you can also be back on the back lines in terms of support. So you kind of see everything a little bit more holistically. How my time as an athlete, I knew I'd have that same responsibility and probably in that same challenge. Really, think about it, you come in as a 21, 22-year-old guy with the only real leadership experience I had was, in the sports arena, and you are immediately in charge of about 80 guys in your platoon. And of those 80 guys, 95% of them are older than you and more experienced than you. So you have to kind of take that approach of, when you come in I'm the platoon leader, I went to the academy, because that already paints you a little bit. They always kind of have a little bit of a cockeyed, like this guy thinks he's the man, he's coming from that pedigree. So yeah, you have to earn it, and again, I think, finding out where they're at, initially making sure that you're taking that approach of, humility and how you're going to serve them in that role, even in something as strict as the military, is just as important. So it was a crucible, man. I learned some good lessons there too. I didn't just walk in day one, you definitely make the mistakes, but you have guys that are these platoon sergeants and these older guys that understand that's going to happen and are invested in making you a better leader.
Certainly. Yeah. And I can see a lot of that servant leadership transfer over into the D1 culture that we have now.
100%. No, 100%. I think that's well said. I mean, I think when I met Will, that was one thing I think that drew me to him, is that, he's always been very clear about what the mission is here. And that's what attracted me, very much to, building something and building it the right way, but it's constantly evolving. We're bringing on people constantly that have more experience even than we do at where we're at right now in terms of the franchise business. So, you have to have that same approach as you're building that team and making sure that they buy into the culture and the set of beliefs and are going to live them out and not just talk about it, and then make sure that our job is really to steward that, right, and be the influencers.
Sure. Let's talk about transitioning out of the military. So you had a couple of different deciding factors. One was a child incoming, correct?
That's right.
Then you moved back to Nashville, and tell us how you met Will when you moved back.
Yeah, no, it was, I think, my military experience, I was fortunate enough to be in the Army at a time, as I mentioned, 96 I got out in late 2000. So if you look at that from a standpoint of what was happening geopolitically and in the world, it was the height of the Clinton peacetime era, and probably the last peacetime era there has been in the last 30 years even. So it was a lot of training. There was a lot of deployment, but they were all, fortunately for me and my family, I wasn't really necessarily ever in any sort of harm's way. Culminated with, I had a deployment out to Kuwait back in '99 it was Operation Southern Watch. If you remember, that's when we kind of had that blockade around Iraq. Hussein was still in power. So, you got to do some real world stuff. And I knew that was going to be, to your point, my son was born 10 days before I deployed on that deployment. So it was a kind of one of those moments. I was like, I'm either going to go and really love this, or I'm going to go and decide like, hey, for my family, I want to make a different choice. And so it was weird. Actually, I loved it, which, I expected, but I still felt that calling to, take what I've done, the experience I had and move my family into a different environment. Because growing up a military kid, knowing that sort of thing is difficult on the family when you're really trying to grow it and support it, grow a family and support a family, I should say, not it. So that led me to Nashville. Moved to Nashville to go to grad school. I was fortunate enough to go to Vandy for that. I felt like I needed to I had a lot of leadership experience, a lot of engineering, math experience, but really no business experience. And so I thought the MBA was going to really helped with that. And it did, right? It kind of taught me the general language of how we were running everything even today. And I met Will. He was, coming off the, just really, this is around 2002. He had, been declared disabled, from the league, was still trying to rehab back in, but was kind of making a living doing what he, training kids. And it was a combination of offsite training in a very small 2,500 square foot space. And, immediately fell in love with what he was doing for the reasons that I fell in love with, being an athlete at the academy, which was, it was the first time I've seen anything. Cause this is, again, go back to 03, 04 or 2002 to 4. I can't remember exactly, but we, essentially we had a situation where, there was no real boutique. CrossFit was just getting going. There was nothing that was kind of private group training. Everything was still done at the Gold's Gym, the local Planet Fitness, I think wasn't even a concept yet. So, what he had was pretty special, right? That you were kind of moving towards a goal with a group of like-minded people, over an 8-week cycle, trying to get better, accountable to each other, and was one of the first adult members. He had mainly kids going through there. So, and I loved it. There was like about 4 of us and we,
Wow.
6 a.m. we were getting after it. And, if someone didn't show up, they were getting that phone call. And I realized, this is definitely something that, has legs. So that's where it started, and he's really been able to, stay true to that passion he has for, specifically this business and how it changes lives. It hasn't wavered, hasn't changed. So that's what's really cool at the core of it.
That's awesome. Yeah. Still stay true to that today.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about, when you transitioned into the private sector from the military and came on board with D1, what were some of those key takeaways that you were able to apply to the leadership of our organization that you still do today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, the one thing that I felt like I could bring an impact immediately was just the reliance on standard operating procedures and really getting, our systems down. If, initially we didn't start as a franchise business, right? We started off in joint venture partnerships with pro athletes and actually physicians, because the business was a physical therapy business that we owned, as well as the training business in the form that you see it today. So it was important that if we were going to scale this and manage it from Nashville, that we had replicable systems. And the military is quite a bit of, following standard operating procedures, and they're there, so that you can rely on them in the absence of any further orders, right? You can kind of have your standards that you go by, and then the leaders really kind of determine how that shifts when they, based on where they are in the battlefield or in the field exercise or whatever it is. So bringing that to the table, I think was, Will's a very much a visionary. I view myself as the integrator, and that's, the idea, is that's something we cover in our, we subscribe to a system called the Entrepreneur Operating System, EOS. And those two roles are really, really key. And they don't always match up, personalities don't always match up, but I understand what my role is to take, what his vision is, make sure it's harnessed in and not a distraction to the team, take exactly what that vision, the salient points that we can execute on, and then distill them down to the company. So, we've been fortunate enough to be friends through all that too. They tell you not to go into business with your friends, but I would vehemently disagree. It's been, the best 20 years I've, had in my career. And it's mainly because we can still hang out together, which is surprising, right?
Yeah, I would say that definitely, military, your leadership, that's the thing that I probably first noticed at D1 was the systems and processes. I've never been more organized in my professional career, so it definitely shines.
Appreciate it. Yeah. And you guys, again, I mean, what's cool is that usually when I say you guys, it really comes from the field, right? It comes from, a better way to do it. We're not, that one thing I didn't like about the military was there was a lot of rigidity in that. And there was, a lot of innovation are typically found at the unit level or even at the squad level that, you couldn't necessarily change an SOP in the military. There's a lot of reasons why, but I think it kind of married two things there for me, which I love being in a fast-paced entrepreneurial environment, because you can test things, you can change things and pivot, which we've had to do as I mentioned to you, starting off as joint venture partnerships to transitioning to franchise. It's a big undertaking.
Yeah.
It's a pivot in the business model, not the underlying training business model, but how we decided to scale. that would be very difficult, if we were a highly bureaucratic, rigid organization.
How was that rapid growth era? What was it like being there from the early days and just watching the brand transform and seeing it explode across the U.S.?
Yeah, it's like anybody tells you, I think that's been around something long enough, it feels maybe to the outside that it was a bit of this like explosion and overnight success, but to me, I'm looking back at it over a 20-year career here that is had a lot of ups and downs, and now we're finally quote unquote the overnight success. I think that last article they published about us, it said how we're transforming. We're biggest names in the business. What an honor to have that written as a headline. That's what you dreamed about back in 04, 05 was, to be that, a brand that is not just around, but, leading the industry. I think we both had that vision, but I think we're both pretty humbled to see that it's turned into that today. So the growth was, it was exciting, and it was also very nerve wracking because it's still, even in today's iteration, I'd love to say we got all our stuff, straight. I mean, you're a little bit building the plane while you fly it. And that's just because you have different complexities at different levels of growth. So, we initially, we wanted to make sure we had a really strong sales, flag planting, so to speak, around the country, and make sure we prove proof of concept and that there's a demand for it out there. So selling and selling new units was paramount. Then you move quickly into, you can get what's called a sold not open list, a SNO list, that is a lot of people signed up to open something that they ultimately, don't have any intention of opening, which is always surprising to me. But you shift that focus into like, hey, we have to have a lights out development process to get these things open. And you're going to learn as you go there, right? To whether it's the size of the facility, the markets we want to go in, how we do it in terms of timing, and we went from larger facilities down to smaller, as I mentioned to you, constantly evolving the model. So it's a more value, a cheaper, a lower cost option for franchisees to open. And then, now we've got kind of those two things solved. And now you have, the scenarios of at 120 plus, you have to have the right infrastructure for support. And so to make sure that there's, not only, somebody who's there to pick up the phone or answer questions for franchisees, but really have coaches that can now take that data point of 120 units that are out there, all the things that are going well, all the things that could be improved upon, and adopting new SOPs and adopting new, I guess just findings in that sense. So it's a challenge for us as the leadership team to stay engaged that way as it grows, because we're also looking at bringing other things in-house. As you get to a certain scale, you bring things like your construction management process. That's a huge undertaking, right? But it will be of value to the franchise system because we can do it for cheaper, and we can obviously now again use the scale, use that great sales growth that we have, to ultimately make it a better experience for the franchisee. So that never changes. It's I would say it's just as chaotic today as it was when we really went on that tear, which was kind of 2018 when we really started heavily investing in franchise.
Just new problems to solve.
That's right.
All good problems to solve.
100%. I think it speaks a lot to the team's mentality. We have grit is something that, Will and I talk about a lot when we're talking about the senior team specifically, but everybody involved and franchisees, and we're always looking at, that's something that comes up. It's not a core value necessarily, but it's, perseverance is one of the character words, but grit specifically, the tenacity to have that, and I define tenacity as kind of stamina with intention, right? Like you have to be able to, stay engaged in this process and understand it's going to change. It's going to iterate. The market's going to change. The customer's going to change. You have a lot of external forces. It's never just fixing one process, leaving it alone, and you're done, or getting frustrated by that. You always have to have the perspective of, man, what an opportunity we have, at this level. But every time we're managing something new, like we'll be managing 150, that'd be the first time we're managing 150. So we're going to have a whole new set of issues, that hopefully we're being, we think of our role as we have to anticipate. We can't react. That's our job as leaders, is to anticipate what 150 looks like. And that's what, that's what we're kind of pushing our chips in, putting the money down on things like construction project management, equipment, more and more resources for the sales organization, for the ops support organization. All that is in an effort to make sure that as we get to that next summit, that we're well prepared, not only to get there, but to when we get there to sustain and push on.
Yeah, no, that's great. And the grit definitely shows. It's whether you meet anybody that's involved on the home office side or the franchisee side or just on the ground in the facility. Seems like every time that I interact with somebody from D1, I go, he's one of us or she's one of us. Like there's something similar inside of us where we're on the same mission.
I agree. And, that like-mindedness is so key. I mean, you can't do anything. I'd like to say this a lot to the franchisees. I mean, the origin story of D1 and is important, but it's only really important to tell the story of, this is, it's embodied in kind of Will's story, right? Of like what we're trying to do in every community and what we're trying to bring to every community. But it really ends there, in that the mission and the execution of that mission is happening at that local level. And so they have to have that same mentality in order for it to be effective. Otherwise, it's just, a cool story that worked in Nashville, right? It's got to be something that can scale. And that's because of the franchisees. I mean, the system is what it is because we've done we don't do 100% great job, but we do, I'd say we're batting about, we're about 95%, at least. I don't think you can bat 95%, but I do think, I think that's key, because I think the message a lot of times comes across as, what are we doing for the system, or what's happening at the franchisor? But it's, we really want to highlight the stories of what's happening in the markets.
Yeah, I love the reverse service pyramid that we structure by. It's like we have to serve our franchisees so that they can serve the athletes. At the end of the day, everyone's goal is to serve the athletes, but we have to better serve the franchisees so that they're equipped to.
That's 100% right. Because to your point, it's similar to the military. The execution happens at that coach interaction, that one-to-one between the group, or the individual personal training between that coach and the athlete. And so that means, are they getting better, right? Do they like being there? Are we about what we say we're about? All that has to translate down into that experience between the coach and the athlete. So it's 100% the right way to view it, is that we have to be supporting that pyramid, so that the frontline people are really are what our product's all about. They're the most important piece and should be on top of that, because without it, we don't really have a replicable product.
Sure. Well, let's wrap up with talking about just a screenshot of where we are as a company currently and where you see us headed in the next, we'll say, 2 years.
Yeah, no, I think, we're definitely, it's a combination of head down, because we want to execute with what we've been blessed to be, to serve, which is a bunch of franchisees that we've been on a rapid growth there. I think we've sold north of 100 units this year. We've opened, we're going to open around 50 units this year. We're on track to open, close to 75, maybe even more than that, based on kind of preliminary estimates right now in the next year. So the footprint in the last 2 years, well, first, when you look back over the last 3 years, it's been about, I think it's about almost 300% growth over that last 2 or 3 years. And we're going to basically continue that on. And, again, that's the whole driving down the hill pretty fast with some things rattling and fixing it while you go, but I think that's what we have. We have a crew. I think we've set ourselves up in terms of not only recent hires, but the team that we have in place now on every level, from sales, marketing, ops, finance, now CPM, in-house construction project management. We have a team that is, from a talent perspective and just, I think, a capacities perspective, that will well outlast, those growth opportunities for the next 2 years.
Certainly.
So that's, I think that's on the franchise side. I think as a brand itself, I think, appreciate what you're doing here, because I think what we've always seen is we'd be disappointed if the vision for the brand was to only be about franchise training facilities. When we feel like D1's a lifestyle brand, we feel like there's an ethos to it that, we all know what an athlete, a D1 athlete is, but we all know that swag, that what they give off is also a mentality. And I think there's so many opportunities to grow this brand. There's the easy layup ones like gear, because we have a cool logo, but there's content, and there's athletes that are obviously affiliated with us. There's athletes all around the country that have really cool stories that I think we can tell through, through a process like what you're doing now. So that, I think this is the brand growth is something I think, that we've heavily invested in over this last year alone, bringing Matt, and Matt's brought in a huge team now, that we really feel like now we're getting that national recognition. We'll be able to scale outside of, just being known as a franchise company, but being known to be the place for the athlete, which is the mission, right? And that can be all things from how you recover to what athletes, there's just so much opportunity ahead of us.
Certainly. I say we've been doing all these things this whole time. There's been great testimonies, great stories. Now we're telling the world about it.
That's right. That's right. And we're just getting started.
That's right. That's right. Well, before we leave, I do have one question for you. I see you're sitting in your home office and I see a golf simulator in the background. Has anybody ever, hit an ace on that thing?
There's a rumor. I wasn't present. I was outside when this happened, but that there was someone from the sales team. I can't remember exactly who. Maybe it was Bryant. I don't know. No, I mean, to get up, I've had this thing for 2 years now. Golf is a passion. I love it. I love the grind of it. There's a lot of corollaries. I know everybody loves golf mainly for that reason. That's addicted to it, is that you can never really, as soon as you think you're getting somewhere, you get humbled and you have to keep grinding.
That's right.
I love it from that standpoint. And I've invested in this sim, on rainy days like today. But to not have ever had one and have some guy, just come in and on his, knock around for 20 minutes and hit a hole in one, that was another humbling moment for me in my golf career.
I do have to note the ball did bounce off a rock. It was insane. So it wasn't just off of pure skill. There was a little luck involved.
I love it. Well,
awesome.
I'm still over. So you're still
it'll come. It'll come. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Dan. Really enjoyed this episode, and I know D1 Nation will as well.
Thank you.
The D1 podcast is proudly brought to you today by the D1 Gear Store, which can be found at gear.d1training.com. D1 Training is the place for the athlete. If you have a fitness goal, we'll help you get there. Visit d1training.com to find the closest D1 turf near you. And be sure to check us out at D1 Sports on all social platforms to learn more about what we do for our athletes. Also, be sure to check out d1franchise.com for more information on how you can bring a D1 training to your community. Be sure to subscribe, like, and share the show. The information provided on this podcast is for educational purposes only and does not guarantee any specific level of earnings or financial success. Results may vary based on numerous factors. Any earnings or income statements are hypothetical. D1 Sports Franchise LLC and its affiliates, the hosts and guests of this podcast, are not liable for any losses or damages related to the use of the information provided. This information is not intended as an offer to sell or the solicitation of an offer to buy a franchise. An offer is made only after a disclosure by a franchise disclosure document, also known as an FDD.